Some stories, they just seem impossible, right? This is one of them. It's the story of a machine born from a dictator's darkest ambition that would somehow, against all odds, become a global symbol of peace and love. It all started with a simple vision. You know, a brilliant engineer who just dreamt of a car for the masses, something reliable, affordable, something for everyone. But that dream, well, it was seized. It was twisted into this powerful promise, a political tool meant to totally captivate an entire nation. And this was the result. Just look at it. A design so pure, so incredibly functional, it was unlike anything else on the road. This was supposed to be the people's car. But before a single family could even get their hands on one, the world changed. The dream was corrupted and the factory's purpose was completely remade for destruction. That friendly, rounded shape? It was hardened into a machine of war. The promise was broken, totally shattered, replaced by the brutal machinery of conflict. And then, just silence. From the rubble of a fallen empire, this little car was just left for dead, a relic of a failed ideology. But somehow, and this is the impossible part, it survived. It crossed oceans, found a new home, and was embraced by a generation that stood for literally everything its creators hated. This is the improbable, incredible story of the Volkswagen Beetle. All right, so to really get our heads around this incredible story, we have to go back, way back to the 1930s, to a moment when an engineer's vision collided head-on with a dictator's ambition. It was like the perfect storm of engineering and politics. See, on one side, you had Dr. Ferdinand Porsche, a total genius who had been dreaming for years about building a small, affordable car. And on the other side, Adolf Hitler, who saw mass motorization as this incredibly powerful propaganda tool. In 1934, their goals lined up, and the People's Car Project, the Volkswagen, was set in motion by the state. And the demands were incredibly specific. This wasn't some vague idea. It was a really tough engineering challenge laid out by Hitler himself. The car had to be fast enough for the new Autobahn, get great gas mileage, and have space for a family. And here's the kicker. It had to be air-cooled. That was a practical thing, really, since most Germans didn't have garages to stop a water-cooled engine from freezing solid in the winter. So Porsche's solution? It was pure genius in its simplicity. Instead of a heavy, complicated frame, he used this simple, stamped platform. And by mounting the air-cooled engine in the back, he got rid of the need for a long drive shaft, which saved a ton of weight and money. This durable, super efficient design was the very blueprint that made the people's car even possible. So the factory was built. They even started a savings program where workers would put stamps in a book to earn their car. But just as production was about to begin for the people, that whole dream was hijacked. And yeah, this slide, it just says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you've got the car that was promised to German families. And on the right, that's what they actually built. The car's brilliant, simple chassis was repurposed to create the Kubelwagen, basically Germany's answer to the Jeep. The promise of mobility for families became mobility for soldiers. And we have to be really clear about the dark reality here. The factory, which was built to fulfill a civilian dream, was converted entirely for war. And historical records show its operations relied on thousands of foreign slave laborers who worked under just brutal conditions. The People's Car Factory had become a cog in the Nazi war machine. After the war, the factory was a bombed-out ruin. The machinery was all set to be dismantled as war reparations. I mean, the car was just seen as this bizarre, ugly remnant of a failed regime. Its story really should have ended right there. You know, after the war, the British, who controlled the factory sector, made this incredible offer to the Ford Motor Company. They said, you can have the entire factory for free. But Ford's chairman, he just dismissed it completely. Like pretty much everyone else in the auto industry, he saw absolutely no future in this strange little car. So what saved it? What pulled it back from the brink? This number. A single order for 20,000 cars. And it didn't come from another automaker or some government program. It came from the British Army itself. A British officer, Major Ivan Hurst, saw potential in the car as a light transport vehicle for the occupying forces. That one order was the lifeline that saved the entire factory from being scrapped. Just incredible. And with that, Under British supervision, German workers started clearing the rubble and slowly, painstakingly, brought the assembly lines back to life. They weren't building a dream anymore. They were just building cars to survive. But in doing that, they gave the Beetle its second chance. So by 1949, the factory was back in German hands, and this Dutch importer named Ben Pan had a really crazy idea. He thought, what if? What if I could sell this car in the biggest market in the world, America? The reception was, well, it was not warm. You gotta remember, this was just 4 years after the war ended. To Americans, this wasn't just some small, ugly, noisy car. This was the car of the enemy. The press was brutal, and dealers wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. Faced with all this hostility, the Dutch importer Ben Pan showed he was a marketing genius. He defiantly rebranded the car as the Victory Wagon. His argument was that since the Allies had won the war, the car now belonged to them. I mean, it was a clever attempt to reframe the car's whole identity and separate it from its toxic past. For years, sales were tiny, just a trickle. But then, in the late 1950s, Volkswagen hired an ad agency that decided to do the unthinkable. Instead of hiding the car's strangeness, they were going to embrace it. This new ad campaign just broke every single rule of the era. See, American car ads back then were loud. They were full of fantasy and chrome. The VW ads were the exact opposite: quiet, witty, and brutally honest. They used these stark images and self-deprecating humor. They flat out admitted the car was strange-looking. They famously called one of their own cars a lemon. That kind of honesty was absolutely revolutionary. This headline, it just captures the philosophy perfectly. The Beetle wasn't a car you were supposed to desire. It was a car you bought with your head. A logical, sensible purchase. By treating the car almost like a commodity, the ads stripped away all the emotional fluff and just focused on pure, simple value. And that was a message that resonated deeply with a growing number of Americans who were just getting tired of all the excess. So the honest advertising opened the door. But what happened next in the 1960s? Well, that was something no one could have predicted or even planned. The car just took on a life of its own. And this right here, this is the ultimate mind-bending irony of the entire story. The car, born from a project of National Socialism, became the unofficial mascot of the counterculture. For the hippies and the young people who were rejecting the consumerism of their parents, the Beetle was perfect. It was cheap, it was simple, unpretentious, and totally anti-establishment. It was the exact opposite of a big, flashy car from Detroit. When you look back on it, the Beetle's journey just seems impossible. It wasn't just a car, was it? It was a reflection of the 20th century's turmoil and its transformations. A machine built with one purpose that was completely redefined by the people who came to love it. And so it leaves us with a question. What gives an object the power to rewrite its own story? Was it the brilliant engineering, the clever advertising? Or maybe an object's true meaning is never really defined by its creator, but by the hands it passes through and the history it lives to tell.